Hi, everyone. Welcome to um, All the Forbidden Things. This is the very first episode of this podcast, and it's a series that I hope we will be able to experience together with many different guests, many different viewpoints, many different perspectives. I was inspired to start doing this because I noticed that in the world right now, we are often fixated on aspects of our identity, such as race and gender and politics and religion. And we might talk about them in public contexts. We might have a channel about them. We might talk about them in a philosophical discussion, usually within our small groups, people who are similar to ourselves. They are forbidden at the dinner table at Thanksgiving, um, but they're also forbidden in a really important and absolutely essential aspect of our lives, and that is in our interpersonal relationships. So, we might talk about who we're going to vote for, or we might have some long conversation about does God exist or whatever else. But we don't usually talk about our experiences as somebody who has that identity marker. And I don't personally think that we are these markers. I don't think we are our religion or our race or our sexuality, but they have absolutely formed our lives. They have absolutely defined a lot of times how we move through the world, how we perceive ourselves, how we perceive everyone else. And that includes our closest friends and loved ones and lovers and spouses. It includes our brothers and sisters, our partners, everyone. Everyone that we meet and everyone that we are close with is affected by how we relate to our own identity markers. If you can hear the sirens in the background, perhaps you can take that as a sign that this is a very important topic. Um, the problem is that when we don't talk about them, when they are completely, absolutely, fundamentally forbidden, we don't really know each other, at least not as much as we think we do, right? We might think, oh, well, this argument isn't really about the dishes. But we probably don't think this argument is about the dishes, is about gender or race. We would never talk about those things. We would never bring them up. And some of us might, want to talk about some of them. Some of us might be able to describe our experiences as a person of faith in a particular religion. But then there are going to be topics for you that are just off limits, even with the people you are absolutely closest to. And sometimes, especially with the people you are absolutely closest to. But as we know, particularly within the context of race, being colorblind, being identity blind, is not a benefit, it's a liability. I have been in relationships in my life where I had stories in my head about our dynamics, that they were related to gender or just love, my lovability, insecurities, anything. And a lot of times they were related to an aspect of that person's people's lives that I had never considered was present in their experience or present in their experience of me. And it was actually defining those experiences between us. And I had this totally other perspective, thinking it was about how I was a woman and they were a man, and it was this whole thing. And of course, I had my own stories running on that. And I think we know in therapy that and relationship counselors that we have to be authentic and open and honest about what we really think and feel and what we perceive about each other in order to move forward in a relationship. But if we're going to keep all of these essential aspects of our identity or how we move through the world, how we perceive our identity off the table, how close can we really be? How much do you really know your loved ones? And are you fighting about the dishes? Or are you fighting about politics or gender or sexuality? And I know that we want to fix these things in the world and we want to be closer and we want to be aligned, but we can't really do that if we're not doing it in our own homes and our own personal spaces. So, this podcast is an effort to get you to start talking about all the forbidden things. Through my example and the example of the people that are on here, we're going to have awkward conversations about things that we never thought to ask each other. And they're going to typically rest around certain forbidden topics, certain forbidden aspects of our identity that we wouldn't think to ask. The way that we're going to do it is by answering questions on behalf of the other person. And the reason that I've chosen this format is because that topic of identity, while it might be outside of our minds, is not actually absent in the relationship. If somebody tells you that they grew up in a certain faith, you completely fill in pictures of what their childhood was like, or even what their beliefs are like. You might even start filtering out what you say to them. So I want to reveal, what are we making up about the other person when we haven't asked them? And how is this playing out in our lives? And I also want to hear about people's experiences, especially those people I love, on all the forbidden things. So our first guest is Juleigh Mayfield. Juleigh and I have another podcast together on her channel, Just Juleigh, on YouTube. That's Juleigh. Mayfield is Mayfield, if you want to look her up online. We talk about her experience being intersex. We talk about all sorts of things, dating, what it's like to try to find love these days, how crazy the world is. So you can watch us at 7 p.m. Eastern time every Sunday night on Just Juleigh on YouTube. But for today, we are going to talk about all the forbidden things.
Hey.
Hi, Juleigh.
You know what I like about
Welcome.
this? Hi. Thank you.
I
to
just
say I like this setup.
introduced you. Go ahead.
I said I love this setup because it's, on our show it's reversed, and so this is on the other side, but this is very true to like.
You're having the special guest experience.
I am. It's different.
Meanwhile, I've got this whole like setup with all these little buttons and gadgets, and I'm like, oh, Juleigh's the producer.
Yeah.
So I was telling our audience about our show on Just Juleigh. But what we're going to talk about tonight together is the subject of gender identity and sex, as in your born sex. So that is the forbidden topic that I think is really juicy in between us. I know a lot about your experience of your sex and your gender. I don't know if you know that much about mine, but I think there are a lot of things you probably want to know what I think of them that we haven't talked about yet. So to recap on the format, we are going to ask each other questions, but instead of answering for ourselves, we're going to answer for the other person. So
Okay.
Juleigh would say, what do you think my favorite color is? and I would tell her what I think her favorite color is. And then we can reverse the question if we want to. But what we'll definitely do is get the real answer after the guess. And then we'll talk about the differences there, and we'll talk about what that answer was. You have 3 options for every question. I have the same if you ask me one. The first is to answer it. The
Okay.
second is to pass.
Okay.
So we could just skip it completely. And the third is to pass back, which is just to get straight to the truth. So you wouldn't try to answer for me. You would just have me give you my real answer.
Okay. So
Okay.
no, it's not like Chelsea Handler. Like I'm not pleading the fifth.
Uh, what do you mean?
You've never heard that? Like I plead the fifth, meaning I'm not going
Yeah,
to tell
but
you.
what do
I'm
you
not
plead
going
the
to
fifth
tell you
on?
that. I'm not going to tell you the truth. I plead the.
Oh, yeah. I mean, okay. So I haven't thought about this. What if I have an unruly guest like yourself and they don't want to give their real answer? Okay. Okay. New rule. You can't ask a question that you're not willing to give the real answer to. So this is how we're going to keep you in line, Julie.
You know me. I answer all my questions with truth and dignity and grace, and
That's true.
I'm a
You
pageant
are
girl.
one of the most authentic people that I know.
I'm a pageant girl. As I play with my
Yes.
hair on your camera.
You look so fantastic. I love this. I love this sparkles glitter. Julie told me before we were filming the other episode for her show, our show on her channel, and she said that it feels like when you have a screen door and you run your hands across the screen door, it's a very tactile experience. So
Yes,
I
this
love
is
that for you.
very like, and I'm giving you very much like Julie's running for Senate hair tonight.
It's so good.
It's so cute. This is only the second time I've worn this hair. I'm gonna wear it. For those of you watching at home, Julie wears wigs. So
She always has fantastic
this
hair.
is the second time I've worn this one, and this particular one, I don't know if you can tell, it's got like this weird like pad on the inside, so it gives you
Okay.
height in the crown, which is lovely. But like when I take pictures, people are like, "Look at you in your senator hair." But this is the second time I've worn it, and it just has like all these like I keep playing with. I feel like Nicole Kidman in a way. Okay.
Yes.
We're gonna stop playing with it. I'll be playing with it the whole show. Let's get into it.
Okay, so let's start with some lighter questions and we'll work our way up onto the things we really want to know. Um, but on the note of the hair, I'm going to ask you, what do you think I like most about my appearance?
I mean, you just said hair, so it would make me think that your answer is going to be your hair.
I totally gave myself away with
You
that one.
did. Look,
Um,
I've always said if I wasn't an advocate and if I wasn't an actress, I think a job that I really would have liked to have done would be to be like an FBI profiler. And I
mm,
think there are so many signs, like if you really listen to people, you can find out a lot about them just in their responses and their nuances. And I think that would be really cool to like look at somebody and be like, they're crazy balls. And this is how I deducted that, right? So, your hair. I'm saying your
okay.
hair.
All right,
Okay.
then I'm going to quickly update it because that was too easy. What do you think?
That was a test
That was
question.
the warm up. Yeah, exactly. So you understand the format.
Mhm.
So what do you think I am most insecure about in my body? And we'll make it safe. It's not something you necessarily think I should be insecure about, but what would you imagine that I get insecure about?
Your breast.
Ouch. Um, no, it's true. Yeah. No, it's true. We don't even
What's
have to
that?
jump on it. Yeah, they probably are. I don't know that I'm most insecure about them. I am insecure about them. Um, I appreciate some aspects of them. It is easy to wear a lot of different types of clothes. I would say I'm actually most insecure about this side of my face. I had some scarring from acne and stuff, and I've been working on getting the texture back. And it just, yeah, that's actually what I'm most
I've
insecure
never
about.
actually noticed your face. I've always thought you've been really kind of cute and pixie-ish, and we've been out a lot before, but I haven't ever, but I have kind of noticed that, like,
I got nothing going on.
probably because I put mine out there all the time for everybody to look at and touch. I just noticed, I think you are a little but I don't think you should be, but but
Oh,
perception,
interesting.
I've been thinking a lot this week about perception and how people think about us. One is none of our business, but two, unless they come up and say, you look like a bitch, and I think this reason is what's behind it, unless they engage you in why they're looking at you or staring at you or questioning you, unless they come up and share that information with you, you're not ever going to know anyway, so you should just keep on trucking. But I've never noticed any of the stuff on your face. I just noticed sometimes, like, you just, like, when you wear certain things, I think you just are very, like, so that's why I said your breast.
Interesting. Wow. You know what's fascinating that I did not expect to be part of this experience of this show is that I thought we were going to find out what we didn't know about each other, but thought we knew. I didn't know we were going to find out what we knew about each other that even we didn't know.
Sorry. Oops.
I love that. Wow. Wow. Okay.
But I mean, the trade-off is, you and I have already talked before about how you're going to have other guests on sometimes too, and they'll be talking to each other. Like, I'll come back on and talk to
Mhm.
somebody I don't know, and then that dynamic could totally change again, because then, I'll have to be really transparent in people guessing things or thinking things about me. Again, going back to that perception base of, that's not who I am, and you're basing that off of how I look in the moment, or your first kind of summation of who you think I am based on what you see in front of you. So it'll be very interesting. Okay, next question. Okay,
Okay, it's your
so
turn.
asking you, what do you think about my body and which is very interesting, this is coming up, by the way, but because I was just talking to Manny about it last night. But what about me do you think I'm most, um, that bothers me most about my body?
Um, I think, and this is based on watching you interact with yourself or what you mentioned about your body. I think your waist is what you point out the most.
That is accurate. That's true.
Oh, see, I
Because,
know things.
and things, it's my waist because, people that are XXY, which, my history, we can always get into that, and we can get it. We've done that before in other shows.
Yeah, please do.
Sometimes they call my variation Klinefelter syndrome, and that is not, the variation is XXY. Klinefelter's is a subset of being XXY for some individuals. But one of the overall characteristics for everybody that's XXY is their midsection, or their waist, is kind of like what they call a KS waist, a Klinefelter's waist, or a pear shape. And I could go to the gym hardcore for the next 6 months and tone everywhere on my body, and that spare tire, that accumulated weight, will still be there. And they say the only way to get rid of it is through surgery. Um, I know very few individuals that are XXY that have been able to do it through weight. Um, what's interesting is, it used to be a lot bigger for me when I was in the male vessel, but when I had to take all the estrogen, because that's how my body was acquiescing to everything as I got older, and everything started to kind of fall into that female shape, it's still there. I mean, I wore an evening gown last night, still had to put on a girdle. Looked amazing in the evening gown, looked great in public. That's still something for me personally that I wish was not there. I would still very much, even at 49, love to be able to put a bikini on and walk down the beach and not have, but there's a trade-off. The trade-off would be, then you'd be able to see my game show buzzer. So Everything comes with a price, Rebecca. But yes.
Okay. What do you think that I have ever questioned my gender? It could be a trick question, so don't think that there's necessarily something there.
I think that you question sometimes if life would be easier in the counterpart vessel. I think a lot of people probably question that. You know, I've been blessed to live in both, and I've seen kind of the extremes of both, and I think a lot of people probably think that way. But that would be my response for you. I think that no. I think more you've probably questioned your sexuality, but not your gender.
Interesting. Okay, so I thought I was going to end up surprising you on this. So
Did I get it
actually,
right?
you
What's the
definitely
truth?
missed a large part of the answer, but I
Okay.
mean, I guess I was thinking the other day that like if you're an attractive man, because I've been doing this thing for one of my clients where we like sourcing influencers and stuff, and all the guys that are like male nurses, they call them nurses,
Mm-hmm.
their accounts are in the millions. And then the female nurses, I mean, they're like trying to get some tens of thousands of followers. So anyway, but I have thought before, like, if you're an attractive man, you can just show up anywhere and kind of do anything. But I I would admit this is a lot. This is a lot of information for this is how this podcast is going to start out authentic. I definitely have experienced penis envy. Um I would say that there have been periods of time where I've never thought of myself as trans in the sense that I've never felt like I was in the wrong body. But I have felt like there's something wrong with my personality that's not matching my body. So it's not that my body's wrong. It felt like my energy was wrong. Like the universe got it wrong. And I think that played out the most in some of my romantic relationships of just like that finding a dynamic where I felt like I could be my authentic self and feeling, because obviously I do show up extremely feminine. And I present myself that way. Um, but I felt like a massive disconnect between how I present and like this secret inner world, this secret inner personality of mine that is not feminine enough, that doesn't match with men well, that's just like I'm like internally intersex or male or something like that. I am not somehow there's something, the personality's off from my body. And I've struggled with that a lot. I've struggled with that sometimes in relationships with men who like men, and feeling like I wish that I could be that for them instead. Um, and I know a lot of friends, female friends, that feel like they're not feminine enough or that they're not living up to their bodies. But for me, it definitely has felt at times like there was a major disconnect. And I think something that has helped with that is leaning into being a powerful woman. Where like I had a therapist who was like, you're not describing masculinity, you're describing strength and power and autonomy and assertiveness or whatever. Like, let's rename these things. But yeah, I've definitely felt like I'm too masculine to be a woman.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting because like sometimes like you remember for my birthday we went out, we were painting the town before Kava, and and you had dressed kind of like you were what you wore that night. You had even joked around and said like I kind of look like a pirate, and I thought go with it. Do you know what I mean? But I think even sometimes in the way that I can see that that would be your kind of, I don't want to say struggle because I don't think you struggle, but I could see where that would be an influence
Hmm.
to how you present and dress sometimes.
Yeah.
I can see that.
Yeah.
I also, while we were talking about it, I think a lot of women have that same issue. You can see it even sometimes in the way they interact with trans women or women like myself, or let's even break it down. If you're just talking about cisgendered women, even the way that they act towards pageant girls, right? You know, if you take women that are into pageants, they are all, and even some influencers, and I'll throw myself into the pageant mix, even though we know my story is different. We're always on. We always have the blush and the eyeshadow and the false lashes and the coiffed hair. And we look like, yes, we look like we could be going to the grocery store to pick up tonight's dinner for our family of 4 and our husband. But we also look like we're about to throw on an evening gown and walk down the runway and be crowned Miss Whatever. And there's power in that. But then we come across as vapid and using our sex to get ahead and having our um our priorities in the wrong place. And there's this kind of like, and then sometimes you'll get women that are like, you're not feminist enough, and you're like, enough? Like, you know nothing about me. You don't know how I vote in the polls come November. You don't know if I'm going to church. You don't know anything about my morals. You're making a assumption based on how you see me and how it's reflecting back on you in what you are or not doing, what you might be or what you might not be doing. And you're finding fault in that. I think a lot of women struggle with that, and I don't think that that should be. We're all different. Do you know what I mean? And I think some women have learned, I grew up in the deep South. My mother didn't even go to the grocery store without having mascara on. She certainly wouldn't have gone outside without having a face on. There's certainly so many references in Southern culture about how women don't leave their house without looking, you know. Um, a lady last night at the birthday party I was at walked up to me and she's like, "Can I have a picture with you?" She was like, "You're stunning. You look amazing. Is that just for this party?" And I went, "No, ma'am. I look like this every time I leave the house. Like, you never know who you're going to meet, what job opportunity is going to present. If somebody's going to hire me to be the weather girl at the local news station, you don't know. So I'm never going to go. I never. It's rare. I think once in my life I've run to CVS without a stitch of makeup on because I had the flu and I was like, I don't care if anybody sees me today, they're not going to know me from a hole in the wall. I'm running to CVS, I'm getting flu medicine, I'm going home crawling in bed. But usually, I mean, you heard me reference it in our other show tonight. I said I almost stopped at a casino. What stopped me? Anybody that knew me would be like, she didn't have enough dollar bills in her pocket. No, I had my makeup on from last night and it wasn't touched up. I was like, I'm not going. I'm not. Even when I stopped to put gas in my car, I threw sunglasses on and a hat. I looked like I was running from the FBI just to pump gas. So, I mean, it's a perception, but I don't think that should be a struggle that you had. That's just, it's a different aesthetic. It's a different aesthetic. And I think women that want to look a certain way. And I think women that don't. I think the other big misnomer in what we're talking about is there is a definite idolization out there where men
Yes.
watch porn and watch Dynasty and see women on television and hope that they're going to date the run into the Playboy model or the centerfold or the Baywatch actress. And I just don't think that measures up. I'm an actress. You have to remember all the time that I'm going to look like an actress all the time for future work. You might not. Sarah down the road might not. That's not her aesthetic, but it's also an unfair kind of parallel that men expect us to all look like that 24 hours a day. I mean, I know women that literally wake up before their husband gets up for a shift and throw on fake eyelashes and blush. So when their husband rolls over to get up and go get ready for that ship, he'll be like, I have the prettiest wife. And you're like, that's not what? I'm that wife that even looking like this every day, I'll put a I'll put a pillow in front of myself. Try not to cuss on your show. I'll put a pillow in front of myself and be like, have a good day at work. See you for dinner. If I decide to put my makeup on. So I just think that that's kind of an unfair parallel. And I definitely feel like women get trapped in that.
Well, it's true. I mean, I think that's where my deepest insecurities come from is like I date any gender. But I do love men. I still like men and like dating men. And I think when I'm with men, especially in the past, but even with men who are like, be whoever you want to be, I still feel this like almost like a horse with a bit in its mouth that I have to make sure that I'm meeting certain looks and certain presentations, or they will eventually lose interest or fade. Like, I don't even, like, my brain doesn't even compute that they might love me enough not to care. I had a boyfriend who had a big effect on me, who attacked my femininity and talked about my presentation and all of that. And it was not a good relationship in the first place, but those messages really reinforced some fears that I had. Um, he kind of always wanted me to be wearing something different or doing something different, and I was just never who he wanted me to be. And and it's hard because when I if I do dress up in a really prissy way with like tons of makeup and some like really fancy little dress. I mean, there are times that I like to really dress up in a femme way, but it's very specific vibe. But if I do like a really frilly pink thing, I don't feel at all like myself. Like I feel like an alien. And I can see that people are receiving me in a certain way that's completely different. And I just feel like I dress up like a doll and I don't even know who I am. And so it's just hard because I feel like on some level there's this constant trade of like, again, it's not even always the clothes. Sometimes it's just the energy. Like, do I have to monitor the energy to make sure that not enough that enough feminine comes out that they don't go away?
I think the real confidence though comes from kind of knowing your style and your aesthetic, right? And always using that. You use it kind of like if you think of a closet, right? Your aesthetic and your confidence is hanging on a rack. You might not be wearing it all the time, but certainly before you leave, you pull it out and you put it on, you go out. I think that's why there's such a empowerment in even women that are in that goth phase, right? That was a big
Mm.
phase in the night, the grunge phase, right? They owned it. We talked about owning it in our other shows before, but they own it. Even in that goth, that's not something I'm interested in looking like, but they own it because even in that way, they feel beautiful in that moment and in that clothing. You're, you know, I think something that's really important to remember, especially in life, is your story could be not yours, but your story could be like the emperor's new clothes, right? And in that parable, in that story, he was naked most of the story. And he thought, I'm in these fine fabrics and people love me because of what I'm wearing and how I'm styling myself, and people are laughing at him because they're like, he's not wearing anything, he's naked. Right. But you've got to have that confidence in life to kind of also it's clothing. Do you know what I mean?
But it's so much more.
It's so much more than that, and
It's
it's so much more
it's
than that for people.
cachet.
Yes. And you had mentioned, putting not to make you laugh, but I'm all about making people laugh. And so you had talked about putting the horse, I always call it
Mhm.
a bridle. What you
Yeah,
talked
it
about
is
putting a bit
bridal
in your
with a
mouth.
bit.
And I'm like, you're talking about this, and I'm like, don't compare yourself to a horse, because there are plenty of people that will always be willing to ride a horse because they don't want to walk and they don't have a car. And this brings me to a very interesting question. We've already talked about what we would guess about what our greatest flaw is, what we feel like body wise is our greatest flaw. What do you think? I think my best feature is.
Hmm. Um, your breasts. No, your face.
This is very interesting. That is, I think I'm pretty. I think I look like my mother. I'm pretty. I think I look like my grandmother, actually, and I think I'm very pretty. That is not what I think my best feature is. I actually think my best feature is my clavicle and my shoulders.
Ooh, yes.
And so
Yes, you have
typically I will
amazing
wear,
shoulders.
especially in the summer, but even in this, I really like the angles of my shoulder. And it's weird because I slouch. I slouch and I'm 5'10", but you would think I'm like 5'8" and a half, 5'9", because I kind of, when I walk, I'm kind of like ET. But but it's my shoulders. I think my shoulder, as I play with this hair is killing me. I'm gonna have to like just stop playing with it. I feel like Marilyn Monroe. But my shoulders, I think, are my best feature, and or my nose. I'm always like, oh, good God, I hope I
Mm,
don't have a car accident, because people always go, "Have you had work done on your nose? You have the cutest nose." Nope, it's just my mom's like ski jump
it's
nose. But those would be but my face, like somebody last night said, "Julie, you're so pretty when you don't use filters." And I was like, "Oh God, I have to use filters." I feel like I look like I think I'm pretty, but I don't think I'm like
I also prefer you without filters. I mean, I mean, obviously filters are fun, but I think your face has more like beauty and character and um there's so much about your face. It's like it's beautiful and it also is like soulful and I mean people are so attracted to you and it's all there. Um
But I think
so
that
yeah.
comes from everything. I think that comes from my story. I think that comes from my strength. I think that comes from my confidence.
Mhm.
I think it's a collection of everything. It's not just
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
and again, that just proves that we have different um we're perception's huge, right? That's what this show's
Mhm.
about, kind of talking. Okay. So um your brain? No.
Wait,
I think
oh,
I think your
you're
I
wondering
think your
what
brain is one of your favorite, like your critical thinking and brain
my
is
favorite attribute?
probably one of your attributes. But um if we're talking body wise, I think your eyes.
Well, see, okay, so now we've gotten deeper because you asked this question initially, or I asked this question initially, and you said it was my hair. And my
That's
eyes,
true. You did
that's
initially.
no, but I like that we're revisiting it. Um, I do like my eyes. My eyes are not, they don't always function at the same time, in the
Who's
same way.
who's do? Who's
Um,
do?
but yeah, I do like my eyes. I like my shoulders too when they're slim. Um, yeah, yeah.
Okay. So now
So
we've done the physicality part.
yeah.
Um what let's talk about this. We're talking about physical traits. What do I find most attractive? And obviously I'm answering for you. So what do you find most attractive on the male form, on the male body?
Okay, so you have to. So I need to ask that to you. So what do you think I find most attractive? That's a really good question.
Um, the the face, the eye, like from here up,
Hmm.
from the nose up.
Wow. Yeah, that's exactly right.
You know how I know that though?
because of all the pictures I send you of the men that I'm interested in?
No, from when we first started talking about like men that I was seeing and dating for my podcast, you would always say, "Show me a picture, I can tell a lot from their face." And I think,
Yeah.
and it's true, you can, and you've always kind of picked them out and nailed them. But I I just think that you see kind of where people have been and
Mm,
where they might be going, and I think that
mm,
you capture that literally from here or even just here,
yeah.
on people. And I think that's most people usually are attracted to when you talk to people, they'll say eyes first. There's something in their eyes or their look, but I think that's generally what attracts you to people.
Yeah, that's so true, I'm sure, because the physiques of the people that I've dated vary. They're not wildly different. But I like people who are fairly fit or whatever. I mean, it's a common taste, but also not. Like, I mean, there's a wide variety of sort of like, even if you are fit, like what type of fit are you or whatever. Um, and yeah, but and I have no real physical type in a sense, but I have a friend who says, no, you totally have a type. Every guy I'm like, oh, that's Rebecca's type. Or even like girls, you have, that's Rebecca's type. And she's like, it's not necessarily a physical type, but it's something that's the same about all of them. So, but yeah, I think it's found in those areas. Okay, I want to ask,
Are you
um,
going to answer about me? Be nice,
yeah,
by the way.
I want to, I think, well, I think it's the obvious thing that women uh seek men to provide.
But we're
Um,
talking physicality, though. We're not talking
right. I'm
characteristically.
I'm talking about the physicality of their bodies. I'm trying to be elegant about it.
Oh.
Um, yeah, I think that's what you are most attracted to. And then second to that, I think their butt.
I do like a nice ass. Can I say ass on your podcast? I just did.
Yes.
I
Yes.
do like a nice, I am a butt girl. I like a nice, firm, juicy Marlboro Man 1978
Really
to
good
like
butt.
86. Fill out those jeans, gentlemen. That's why I don't like
Yeah.
saggy pants. Like, but I like just something you can walk up and just. This is gonna sound really weird, but I'm all about metaphors. I want that kind of butt on a guy that if I'm standing in line for over 2 hours waiting to get on a roller coaster at Six Flags or any other theme park, I can wrap my arms around them and just hold on and talk and canoodle. And people will
With
be
the
like, and people
back
will be
pocket.
like, put my hands in his pockets, and people can be like, are y'all gonna ride at the front of the train or the back of the train? And I'll be like, a train. Just give me a train. I don't care where. I don't care where we're sitting. I'm completely happy right now with this. Maybe get me a Diet Coke when we get off. Um, but I don't drink diet, so I don't know. I would ask for that. And then the other thing is, actually, this is going to surprise you, and we're telling the truth. I just got a little dizzy, so I mean, here we go. My favorite area on a man physically is the belly button.
Really?
Now, when I tell you why, now I have found in dating, it's not always, it is not always something you should tell people because they're a little weirded out by it. And it's not what you
Sounds like a
think. I'm not
fetish.
going to be like, I'm pulling the lint out and making little animals out of it. That's not what I like the belly button usually because you can tell if a guy works out based on how it sits on his body. I don't tell people that. But for the first 9 months of your life, it was how you fed and it was how you lived. So I've always just enjoyed.
That's so intimate and human.
Mhm.
I love that.
You also can tell if they had a good OBGYN if it's an outie or an innie, because you realize somebody that cut your umbilical cord was not a Boy Scout or a Girl Scout before cutting it, because their knot skills are horrendous. Now you have an outie. Just kidding.
And we're not anti-outie on this show. I should do an episode literally just between an innie and an outie. There would be a
Maybe
lot
they
of
have
trouble
different
coming up.
characteristics personality wise. But yes, I'm a butt girl and a
Belly button.
butt girl and a belly button, kind of.
Yeah. We're starting to cover a lot of the ground that I came up with questions as, but one thing I want to know is, what do you think my first experiences were like with dating? Like, do you think it was easy? Do you think it was early? Do you think it was late blooming? Like, how do you think that went for me? And was it with just men? Was there women?
Well, how young are we talking? Can you give me that information?
No. Yeah, I mean, my very first experiences. So when do you think
I mean, I know you.
first
Are we
was
talking like
involved with?
kindergarten sandbox, or are we talking like more serious, like
Well,
adolescent
okay,
going into high school?
so I mean, I would say
Because you
the
would have
world's your
changed. You
oyster.
change a lot in those time periods. Right?
Yeah, but see, the thing is you're assuming I had kindergarten sandbox experiences, right? So this is what I want to know. Like, when do you think I even talked to boys or was interested in boys, or how do you think that even went?
My personal opinion would be that you probably, through your adolescent years, were oblivious to like boys and probably girls. I feel like in your adolescent years, you were probably that girl that your parents sent you to school and you came home. I don't want to say you were homeschooled, even though I do kind of feel like your mom could have homeschooled you, but I don't think she did. Because I feel like I feel like that's more of an American Midwest kind of thing and not a European, like your mother's British. So I don't feel like they did that over there just because of the way their grades matriculate and stuff like that. So I don't think you're homeschooled. But I do think when I think about your parents and your parentals, and I think about your dad's kind of brain and how he functioned and works and his work ethic and what I know about your mom a little bit, I think you went to school and I think there was probably a hard push on you to be very academically focused, and I think you were. And I think that maybe your first introduction into even realizing boys or feelings probably stemmed when it does for most individuals, which would have been like middle school dances, even though I feel like that still might not have been somewhat important to you. So I think you really started to experiment maybe going into high school. And then when you're in college, I think you were like, okay, well, let's start to dive in a little bit deeper into what I'm trying to facilitate in my own love life, and maybe you experiment, because now I know you as an adult and I know that kind of all the barn doors have been blown off the barn and you kind of go in whatever direction.
Feels right.
You're very like free spirit now. Not I don't want to say that you're like smoking doobies in the woods and you're not Lady Godiva, but I just feel like you're very like you're open now. I know that you're like, okay, well, today I met this guy at the coffee shop and he's really cute and I like this about him and I looked at him from here to here and I think he has an interesting story, so we'll go out with him. But I know you're like that with women too. So I think that, but that's my perception of how I think pretty much your life kind of played out.
I would have thought, that's why I asked you, because I think that's what I thought you would have thought. And so, okay, so I will give you the kindergarten one. There was one kindergarten experience. I didn't want to throw us off by throwing it out there, but I did kiss a boy in kindergarten. I accidentally ran into him in line. and his name was Croy Snap. Sorry, Croy. Hope you have a wonderful life. And we touched lips, and then I was like, oh my, I think we were both like, oh my God, did we just kiss? And then I kissed him again because I was like, well, what the hell? It happened. And then he moved to Michigan or something, and it didn't work out. But I had
How
a
do you spell
crush.
his name? Like Snap, like
Yeah,
SNAP?
he always did this to help people remember.
I am
Oh
looking
my
on
gosh.
Facebook right now. I'm just
And
kidding.
there was Nick
Are you
Stanton.
single?
There was Nick Stanton, who was real cute, who I used to play with on the playground, and I liked him. I had crushes on boys. I actually was very awakened to men. Um, Bizarrely, at a very, 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 very young, I was fascinated by things young children should probably not be fascinated by. And there's no, not to my knowledge, there's no dark reasons for that. Um, but I was very curious about men, the male body, everything. Um, but then I struggled, and then I was interested in women in high school, but I wasn't as aware of my interest in them at the time. I didn't really know. It wasn't allowed. So it wasn't even something you could conceive of. I went to a Christian high school and Christian school from like 5th grade on. And and so it wasn't something that like would even like occur. And if it had occurred at that time, it was still like the worst thing in the world to be a lesbian, like at any school anywhere. It was like you were an outcast for life.
Like
So
Peppermint
that,
Patty on the Peanuts.
yeah, it wasn't an option. So I didn't even, I remember being fascinated by girls or like feeling close with them in a way that I don't know if straight women do. But I didn't really realize that so much until I was in college, and I didn't feel like I would be an outcast. But boys, I had a hard time, and I don't know whether it was this masculine thing or not. I didn't perceive that at the time. I had one boyfriend. We didn't ever kiss because we did this Christian thing where we like were courting, but then we weren't going to kiss until we were married. It was a whole vibe. He was lovely. It didn't pan out. Um, but otherwise I had trouble. I had trouble in high school. There weren't a whole lot of guys to choose from. I didn't know how to cross over to the other side somehow. I sort of felt trapped in my experience. And I was always the pursuer. Like I asked someone out to high school, dance. I always pursued them. So yeah, that was my experience. Kind of a surprise.
Yeah. Hmm.
Okay, it's your turn.
It's not my
We got
turn. I
no,
answered the
we got
question.
well, wait, you answered no. I want to know.
I answered
Well,
the
you get one
question
more.
about you, and then you responded. But now, don't you have to ask me the same question? Like,
No,
don't
I
you have
have
to
to.
answer for me? I thought that's how
No,
this works. She's
we can.
afraid.
No,
She's
no,
afraid
we
to
can.
answer.
No, we can. If I wanted that to be the question, if we wanted that to be the question for you, what I think your experience was, we can do that. We've got one more question.
Let's maybe
So
not do that
ask
this
me
show.
what I should guess about you.
What should you guess about me?
No, you're an asshole.
That was not the answer. You're an asshole. Um,
Yeah, ask me one
okay,
more
let's see.
question. What do I think
This is
about you?
hard. This is hard. Um, what do you think? I don't know. That's hard. That's hard because we've already talked about a lot. I'm not saying don't ask or guess something about me. I'm just trying to facilitate something.
Is it hard because there's things that you would ask but you have resistance to them because you're like, "Oh, ouch, I don't even know if I want to know what she thinks," or like, or is it hard because I already know
Okay,
everything
okay,
about
I have
you?
one. I have
Okay.
one. This is you probably would know this though, but what do you think is my greatest fear
Hmm.
in life? What do you think my greatest fear is?
Oh, I had that question prepared. I'm so glad you brought that up. Um, I forgot. Um, I think your greatest fear is being alone. I think your greatest fear is never having that relationship that you have in your mind that you'd really like to have, and um, and that you won't experience that, and that you will feel alone in that.
Kind of.
No.
I take
Hmm.
that. So my greatest fear. So I've learned a lot in this last year, obviously on our show, Optimistic in Orlando, and I've learned a lot about dating and relationships. And what I've learned is there are absolutely different types of love. We talked about that tonight, kind of even when we talked about compatible love and passionate love. But there are definitely layers of love. And so I don't think in my life, even though I've lived a magnanimously interesting existence, I have had love affairs and I have had lovers, and I continue to have people that are interested in me. Are they long relationships? Maybe, maybe not. Have I had the opportunity to be in love? Yes. So is that my fear? No. My actual fear is dying alone. My actual fear is when I take my people come in and say, "Well, we all die alone. We all die alone." And I'm like, "Yes. We all die alone. Like I'm not going over a cliff in a school bus full of although that could be nice, but we're all going to
We
die
can
alone.
arrange that if
Right?
you ever need that one day.
We're all going to die alone theoretically. But what I mean in that is not having a lover at that time to be physically present in my scope when I pass over. So my greatest fear is that I will not have people in my life or not have anybody with me when I pass over. And as a Christian, I feel like there are people on the other side, and all these different things play into that. But my greatest fear is not so much that I won't have that perfect relationship love, because I get that in little ways, and I have gotten that in little ways throughout my life. Like I've had lovers, I've had great sex, I've had passionate moments, I've had um, scandalous sidewalk chocolate. I've had all of that. But um but my greatest fear is that when I die, whether that be in a tragic setting or in a hospital, I just feel like there won't be anybody there to be like, you've done great things and you're going to be remembered. And I just feel like that's my greatest fear, is that I won't have anybody to remember me and keep my story alive. I think a lot of people feel that way, but
Yeah.
I don't have a legacy. I mean, I have the legacy that I've created in my advocacy, but I don't have children. I don't have extended family. So my greatest fear is that um I'll pass and
Well, you
I'll
just
be
passed
alone.
on that fear to me. I'm like, oh, I feel that now. um, it's real. It's a real feeling.
So I mean that's the truth. And I've always kind of had that fear, and people are like, "You're afraid of." I'm not afraid of dying. I'm not afraid of the actual death. I'm not afraid of that. And I have lived just an amazing life. My fear is that I won't be remembered, and that my time here won't be
Well,
celebrated. And yeah.
I mean, I know you know this, and it doesn't change that that's your worst fear or what you want. But you you will be remembered. You'll be remembered by me. You'll be remembered by everybody that's ever been touched by what you do. You'll be remembered by so many loved ones. So that that will remain. But I know what you're talking about in terms of not having a partner or a family that will survive you, and that's a real thing. What do you think mine is? And then we'll sign out.
Well, now it's what I just told you.
Yeah, sure.
I hmm, I think you're fearful that, kind of on that same trajectory that um you'll usher out others, but you won't necessarily be in a relationship that's whatever fulfilling is for you, that it just won't you won't find it. I think that you kind of feel like, even though you're way younger than I am, I just think that you feel like so many others do, that that opportunity is not going to be succinct, and that what you're hoping for or looking for is out of grasp.
Um, I do have a fear similar to that, it's not my greatest fear, but I think at this point I've almost like given up on looking for something specific, but I think there is a feeling of like, yeah, there is a longing for someone to stay around, and a fear of always kind of like, how long would someone stay around, and would they stay around? And then also, am I even able to handle that, and all those things. But my worst fear is not meeting my potential, and not that there's something that I'm capable of, or things that I'm able to do that I don't that I don't ever realize.
Where do you think that? I mean, this is always really interesting too, because I think what we fear most is not how we're born, and I think it's a learned thing.
Yeah.
So where do you think that came from? Do you feel on some level that there was a push in your dynamics with your brother and yourself and your parents, that you had to be kind of top of your game, head of your class, well-rounded? Do you think, and not blaming them, but do you feel like
Mm.
it's kind of it started kind of there? Do you feel like it's come more from looking at counterparts that are your same age and thinking, I haven't done what they've done? Do you think it's more kind of,
Wow. I think,
you've certainly grown up in this kind of age. Even I have, but you are certainly wrapped age-wise in this kind of social media climate of, I'm doing this and I'm doing that and I'm doing this and I'm doing that and I'm doing this and I'm doing that and I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And I think it's so easy to kind of go, I'm not doing that
yeah,
yet.
I think it was probably during high school and college, like the way that my sort of particular slice of millennial era was raised, was still a very like hopeful era where you could kind of be whatever you wanted to be, and your number one thing was to pick who you were going to become, and it was going to be this really successful thing, and you were going to be an astronaut, or you were going to be whatever, and one's identity was that. um but I think you're right about, I did I had I had a thing, this is going to be rough to end on. I had a thing where I had a man-hating period, and I thought it was because of men in my life that I'd had bad relationships with or experiences with. And then when I looked back at like very deep-seated resentments, I realized that it was sibling rivalry. I realized that I grew up perceiving, and my parents and my brother were like, we didn't think that you had no future. But I grew up perceiving that he had the birthright, that like he had the right to a life, to a future, to a career, and that like anything I did was just cute.
And you think that's definitely because of the gender? You think
Yeah.
you
Oh,
think if
yeah, it was
you'd been a
absolutely
cis,
gender.
I mean, do you think, well, let's counter that. I felt that way too. And if you remember, I had an older brother and I was the younger brother at the time because we didn't know anything about my intersexuality at that time. And I even have written in my book, which you've read, that there was this strange, and I spoke recently to my parents about it. I just felt like because he was the firstborn, it didn't matter what gender he was the firstborn. He was the golden child. And I just kind of felt like, okay, well, they're clearly putting a lot on him. They still put a lot on him. Do you know, like, in ways, I think that's partially how I grew up. I think it's when I grew up. I think it changes with the decades. I think that, you know, my mom, even today, God love her, but she's very like invested in the royal family. And I'm like, I am I Harry? Like, I'm Harry. Like, you know, and that's fine. It takes a lot of pressure off me, but it also puts a lot of pressure on us, right? Because we have this
We have to make
kind
up
of,
for it somehow.
yeah. And I just wonder if you think that would have been the same dynamic if your brother had been an older sister, would
Or if
she
I had
still
been a
carry,
boy.
or if you'd been a boy, would she still carry that kind of placement, especially in your
Wow.
mind?
So if I had been a boy, I think I would have felt really similarly to you because my brother's just very, very intelligent and I have a much more creative intelligence. And he just has, yeah, he has that firstborn personality. But I do think that the particular flavor of my resentment and some of the agreements I made with myself moving forward based on that same, it's like the same thing, but a different flavor, were very gendered.
Yeah.
And it was
Which
like, I'm
also
going to
could be,
prove that I'm not just here for a man. I'm going to prove that I'm not the second class citizen. I'm going to prove that and somehow it has to be more than even anyone else somehow. So yeah, I don't know. It seems like it would be somewhat related to that.
that's interesting. That's
Whew.
interesting.
Wow. Well, Julie, this has been amazing. I
It's
feel
very
like
fun.
we really got to know each other better. And
Yeah.
yeah, we had some interesting discussions. Well, thank you so much for being my first guest. I wouldn't have it any other way. Can you tell us where people can find you and also where they can learn a little bit more about intersex? Because a lot of people don't know what that is, and that's
Sure. Actually,
important.
the easiest way to learn about intersex is I send everybody to the United Nations website because there is a fact sheet on the United Nations website about the intersex community. Briefly, intersex is the global medical term that covers and houses over 57 chromosomal and genetic variations that lie on a spectrum or a bridge between the push narratives of XX and XY. Any of these variations fall under that umbrella term of intersex. These variations can present in many different ways. They do present in many different ways. Nothing about intersex or that spectrum is black and white. So you can't just kind of pigeonhole. You can't be like, I know an intersex person, and they're just like that. We're not gonna be. So go read more on that fact sheet. If you want to learn more about my story, you may check out Just Juleigh, spelled just like my name.com. It's kind of my landing page for everything. And of course, you can check out our YouTube channel, justjuleigh.com, to see our weekly podcast and show with my beautiful co host, Rebecca Davis. So, it's a very different show than this one. We drop we drop a lot of curse words and we drink wine. So if you think we're unhinged now, come back on Sunday at 7 to justjulie.com.
Oh man. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you all for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. And Julie, I will see you next Sunday.
Bye.
Bye.